Welcome back, guys, to Fear Begins, a step towards the horror. In today's episode, I am sharing 10 true disturbing stories about creepy encounters in the Great Smoky Mountains. Get ready, because these stories will not let you sleep comfortably for weeks. But before we begin, please consider subscribing and do not forget to like and share with your friends. Let me know where you are watching from. Thank you all. Now let us start. I was 24 when it happened. I had picked up a seasonal maintenance job at a campground in the Blue Hollow Mountains. Not exactly a career move, but at the time I wasn't looking for much. I just wanted a break from people, noise, traffic, and the constant buzzing in my head that never seemed to stop when I lived in the city. So when I saw a post for a quiet maintenance gig out in the woods, basic upkeep, nothing fancy, I took it without thinking twice. The campground wasn't huge. A few dozen sites spread across a wide forested valley, tucked beneath steep ridges. The kind of place where your phone loses signal before you're even out of the parking lot. They gave me a key to a tiny cabin behind the ranger station, just a single room with a cot, a table, and a rattling little heater that sounded like it was coughing to death every time it kicked on. But it was peaceful. The air was sharp and clean. Nights were dark and quiet. It was what I needed. My days settled into a rhythm quickly. Wake up early, boil water for coffee on the camp stove, check the pump stations to make sure nothing was leaking, pick up trash if campers had left any behind, clean out fire pits, haul propane tanks to and from the supply shed. It was physical work, but nothing complicated. I liked that. No questions, no long explanations. Evenings were for rounds. I'd grab a flashlight, walk the gravel paths, and check each campsite. Mostly I was making sure no one had left food out. You'd be surprised how many people think a half-zipped bag of marshmallows on a picnic table is fine overnight. Raccoons were usually the first to show up, but bears weren't shy either, especially late in the season. One night in late October, the air had a sharp snap to it, colder than usual, even for the hills. Most of the weekend crowd had cleared out, leaving only a handful of diehard campers. The rest of the sites were empty. I was on my usual loop, flashlight in hand, bundled in 2 jackets. It was almost 11 when I passed Site 42, tucked near the edge of the woods. A family had checked out that afternoon. The site was clean, but they left a big red cooler beside the fire ring. I cursed under my breath. That's exactly the kind of thing that brings trouble. I grabbed the handle and hauled it uphill to the storage shed by the bathhouse. The cooler was heavier than it looked. Still had some stuff inside. I didn't bother checking. Just shoved it in, locked the door, and stepped back out onto the trail. That's when I paused. Something didn't feel right. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, just tired. Maybe the cold was messing with my ears, but no, there was something missing. Sound. The forest was too quiet, not peaceful, empty, no crickets, no owls, no rustling in the brush. Even the wind had gone still. It felt like I'd stepped into a room where all the sound had been sucked out. My boots crunched on the gravel, and that was it. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the whole world was holding its breath. I stood still, listening, waiting. Nothing. I kept walking, trying to shake the unease. But when I rounded the curve near the tree line, I froze. Something crouched just off the trail. It was maybe 15 feet ahead, right where the gravel met the underbrush. My brain reached for the obvious label bear. That would have made sense. Big, low to the ground, not moving. But something was wrong. I lifted my flashlight, and the beam landed on it. It wasn't a bear. The face, if you could call it that, was turned straight at me. The eyes were huge and glossy, too round, like oversized marbles. Not reflective like animal eyes, just wrong. Its limbs were stretched too long, bent at strange angles. The arms hung low, like the elbows were in the wrong place. The joints didn't make sense. It looked like someone had tried to build a human from bad instructions and ran out of parts halfway through. My body locked up, and in the same breath, it stood. The motion burned in my memory, a weird fluid stretching like it didn't have bones. It uncoiled up and up until it towered over the trail. Taller than any person I'd ever seen. Its knees bent the wrong way, human-shaped, sort of. But not in any way you could believe if you looked too long. It tilted its head slow, curious. Confused, I didn't know what to do. My mouth spoke before my brain caught up. "I'm not here to bother you," I whispered, instantly regretting it. The words dropped into the silence like stones into a well. I took a step back. It moved, not fast, matched me, same rhythm, but it didn't walk, it slid. Like the ground wasn't real, like it had only seen walking once and was trying to mimic it without knowing how legs worked. Its joints fired too late or too early, or not at all. It didn't feel alive. It felt like something pretending. I stepped again. It followed, same pace. Always a little closer. My hands went cold. My breath came short. I turned and ran, I didn't think. Just bolted down the trail. Flashlight bouncing wildly. Gravel spraying underfoot. I didn't hear it behind me. No footsteps, but I didn't dare stop. I fixed on the ranger station's porch light like a beacon. Solid, real. Every so often, I glanced back. It never chased me. It was always just there, still closer, but not moving when I looked. Just standing like it had skipped forward while I wasn't watching. No sound, no motion. Only those wide staring eyes catching the edge of my light. I burst into the ranger station, slammed the door, locked the deadbolt, and backed against the wall. My lungs burned, sweat soaked my jacket, every part of me shook. I checked the window. Nothing, just trees again, like nothing had ever happened. I didn't call anyone. I sat there all night gripping the base radio, staring at the door. The silence stretched for hours. Then slowly, without warning, the night sounds returned. Wind, crickets, normal. By morning the world seemed whole again. But it wasn't. At first light, I dragged two other workers, Brian and Delaney, out to the trail. I said maybe a bear had wandered close. We walked the curve together. My footprints were there, clear and frantic, and beside them, just sharp, jointed marks. Like something caught between a bird and a person. Made by something that didn't belong. Delaney stared. Brian muttered that maybe the rocks had shifted. I didn't argue. I went back to the cabin, threw my gear in the truck, and drove. My brother Mason and I were doing what we had done since we were teenagers. Picking a day with nothing else going on. Tossing some snacks in a backpack and driving out into the mountains with no real plan. We had been hiking Carver Ridge and the surrounding trails since high school. We grew up about an hour from there. By now we had worn through all the named trails. The ones with the official wooden signs and mileage markers. So we figured we would try something new, not a dangerous plan. Just the usual dumb kind of casual we always went with. Drive until something looks cool and pull over. That day felt safe. Middle of the afternoon. Sun high. Air warm without being muggy. Not even a hint of weather. I remember thinking it was the kind of perfect hiking day you dream about when you are stuck behind a desk. We were joking in the car, sipping gas station coffee that had already gone lukewarm. Arguing about whether that one band we liked in college had ever actually been good or if we were just nostalgic idiots. Then we spotted it. A tiny gravel patch just off the main road. Barely room for a single car, no other vehicles, no trailhead sign. Nothing but a narrow dirt line dipping into the woods. It did not even look official. That made it more appealing. We parked, stuffed the car key into one of those shoelace loops, and headed in. The trail climbed gradually. The woods thickened around us, but it was not creepy. Just quiet, peaceful even. The kind of quiet you do not notice until it stops being background and starts being the main thing you hear. We followed the path without much talking, just the crunch of our boots, the occasional bird, some rustling in the brush. About 10 or 15 minutes and the ground leveled out, and then we saw it. Railroad tracks out of nowhere. The trail just ended, and there they were. Two rusted rails half buried under leaves, warped slightly like something underground had pushed them up. Vines coiled across the wood like veins. It looked like no train had touched them in 50 years. And then we saw the bridge ahead of us. The tracks led to what used to be a bridge or part of one. Most of it had collapsed, just a twisted rib cage of beams hanging over the valley below. I do not know how it was still standing at all. Parts of the metal looked melted, not from fire. More like time had chewed through them and left the husk. You ever see something so decayed, it almost looks alive again, like the rot has become part of the forest? That was what it felt like. We didn't say much at first, just stood there staring. Then Mason gave me this look like, well, obviously we are going down there. Off we went, scrambling down the slope beside it. It was steeper than it looked. Loose rock and dirt gave way under our boots. We ended up half sliding, grabbing roots and whatever we could find for balance. Once we reached the bottom, the bridge loomed overhead. From down there, it looked even more unstable, bolts barely clinging to the rotted wood. One beam had snapped and was just hanging in midair, like it hadn't gotten the message that gravity exists. We poked around a bit, found pieces of wood with huge rusty nails still stuck in them. A section of track that had detached and slid halfway down the hill. No signs, no markers. Nothing to explain why it had been left there like that. It did not feel like a place people were meant to find. Eventually, we decided to head back up, which was worse than coming down. My thighs were burning within minutes. I slipped twice and got a scrape on my palm that oozed dirt for the rest of the climb. Mason cursed at every other breath. By the time we reached the trail again, both of us were soaked in sweat. He leaned against a tree, chest heaving. I bent over, with my hands on my knees, thinking I needed to start doing more cardio. That is when the voice started. It was a scream from somewhere deep in the woods. Not close, but not far enough either. Just loud enough to stop both of us cold. It was not words. It was not even yelling in that help me kind of way. It was pure rage, raw and feral, stretched out too long, like whoever was screaming did not know how to stop. We looked at each other, did not say anything. Just listened. Then it came again, but this time not from a distance. It was suddenly right there, not approaching, not getting closer, just there. Like someone had dropped it 20 feet ahead of us out of thin air. Still screaming, but sharper. Now more guttural, almost glitchy. It did not sound human anymore. Not because of what it was saying. There was still no language, just that garbled fury. But because of how it was doing it, I grabbed a branch. Not a great one, too light, but it gave me something to hold on to. Mason did the same. His knuckles looked white against the bark. I told him maybe it was just some guy lost, maybe tripping on something. Saying that helped for about 2 seconds. Then the scream moved. It did not fade or echo. It just shifted like someone had dragged and dropped it across a soundboard, from in front of us to the left, then the right, then behind us. The timing was too fast for footsteps. No one moves like that. It circled us. Fast, erratic, impossible. Each time it jumped, it fell closer. I swear I felt the sound vibrate through my ribs. We ran, neither of us shouted, we just turned and sprinted. Roots, rocks, low branches, we did not care. The screaming chased us, shifting faster now, snapping from left to right in front of us again. There was no logic to its path. It did not follow the trail, it did not follow the land, it just moved wherever it wanted. At one point I tripped and slammed my shoulder into a tree. I barely felt it, my body was running on adrenaline. Every nerve screaming louder than the sound itself. I kept going, chest burning, lungs on fire. Then the sound flickered. I do not know a better word for it. It glitched like a record skipping. One moment it was behind us, then it was overhead, then it dropped hard to our left again. It did not feel natural anymore. It did not even feel physical. It was like the forest had been warped somehow. Like whatever it was, did not have to follow the rules the rest of us did. That is when I started praying. I am not even religious. But I heard myself muttering under my breath. Just nonsense at first. Then actual prayers I had not said in years. Begging it to stop, to go away. Mason must have heard me because he started yelling too. Only he was yelling my name. telling me to move faster, and then it stopped, just like that. Mid-scream, cut off like someone hit mute. We did not slow down, not at first. We kept running until we saw the car, seeing it parked there totally normal. Was one of the weirdest moments of my life, like nothing had changed, like we had imagined everything. We dove in, slammed the doors, sat there in silence, both of us still panting, clothes soaked through, faces pale. I looked at him finally and asked, "Did you hear it circling?" He nodded, swallowed, nodded again. "Did it sound like words to you?" Another nod. "No," he whispered. That was enough for me. We drove down the mountain in silence, not even the radio on. Every once in a while I would check the rearview mirror, half expecting something to be following us, but there was nothing, just the trees. It wasn't until we were almost back in town that I remembered the stories. I had heard them when I was younger, barely paid attention at the time. Some local legend about a guy who went missing near the old tracks. People said he had snapped out there, that he screamed until his voice stuck to the trees. Others said it was never a man at all, just something old. Something the forest hid when it wanted to, and let loose when it was bored. I do not know which version is true. I just know we heard something. Something that could not have been a person. Something that does not move the way people move. That does not sound the way people sound. I have not been back to Carver Ridge since, neither has Mason. I booked the cabin because I wanted to be unreachable. Just me, some books I had been pretending to read, and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I was not running from anything dramatic, no breakup, no job loss, just the slow static of everyday life building up until my brain felt like a frozen computer screen. The listing described the place as secluded. No cell service, off-grid, which sounded like bliss. It was near a place called Sparrow Ridge, just a dot on a map west of Bryson Ridge. I had found it through a forum post, not a mainstream rental site. The host gave handwritten directions that read, "Turn right at the post with the yellow tape, past the rusted gate, and follow the road until the second mailbox with no number." The deeper I drove into the mountains, the less real the world behind me felt. The cabin itself was bare. One room with a steeper frame roof, no electricity, just a gas lamp bolted to the wall and a few matches in a jar. Outside there was a composting toilet in a little shack that smelled like wet pine. Inside there was a cot, a wood stove, and a small table with one chair. It was perfect. I did not tell anyone the actual location, only said I would be somewhere in the Smokies and unreachable until Sunday. A few people texted have fun, and that was it. The first day I just existed. I unpacked some food, a small speaker, a couple of books, and a hoodie that still smelled like my old apartment. I built a fire, warmed soup, and drank cider from the bottle. That night I lay on the cot staring at the rafters while the wind made the wood groan. It felt like sleeping inside a giant wooden lung. The next morning I found an old map inside a binder labeled cabin instructions. It was hand-drawn with uneven lines and notes like "no longer passable" and "watch for bees." The trail behind the cabin was barely visible, but I followed it. The hike was peaceful at first. Everything smelled like moss and warm leaves. About 3 miles up, I reached a rocky bluff with a wide view of the valley. As I sat to eat an apple, I heard footsteps, quick and unsteady, in the underbrush behind me. I stood expecting to see someone appear, but no one came. The forest went completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. I walked back to the cabin with the heavy feeling that something was following. Not close, but always a step behind. That evening, I stayed inside with the lantern. I tried to read but kept glancing toward the window. Then I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks right under the kitchen window. Not wind, not falling branches. I stood frozen, listening. Finally, I stepped onto the porch and turned on the old floodlight. It flickered and buzzed, but showed only the clearing. Nothing moved, no footprints, no animals, just the dark forest waiting. The next morning I saw them, 2 bare footprints under the window, long toes spread wide as if gripping the earth. The heels barely touched the ground. I crouched staring, refusing to believe they were real. I snapped a picture but deleted it immediately. I did not want proof. I drove into the nearest town called Woodpine, bought crackers I did not need, and stared at the cashier hoping for something normal. They only said you staying out past Ridge Point. Not much out there but rock and rack. That night I could not sleep. Around 1 in the morning I heard it again, not knocking this time, a dragging sound along the wall. Slow and deliberate. It scraped across the wood moving past the windows. I lay frozen. The curtains were thin. I could see the shadow of something. Tall, limbs too long, neck bent wrong. Then it stopped and spoke. "Come out, Halden." The voice was outside, but I felt it in my head. It said it again, but this time 3 voices layered together. One was my mother's voice, soft but shaky. Another was deep and rough like my old roommate. The third I did not recognize. Cold and urgent. "Come out. Come see what is waiting." It did not knock or try the door. It just stood there, muttering fragments of my life in voices that did not belong. Eventually the shadow stepped back into the trees. I stayed frozen until daylight. Then I packed and left. No breakfast, no coffee, no looking back. I dropped the key in the rental box and drove until I reached the highway. I told myself it was all in my head. Stress, solitude, leftover cider. But 2 weeks later, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a folded curtain identical to the one from the cabin. Tucked inside was a photo. It was me asleep in bed. Face turned toward the window. The picture had been taken from outside, and in the glass reflection was a pale face that looked almost like mine but wrong. The eyes faintly glowing red. Since then I have never slept beside a window again. I was 23 when I went hiking in the Pine Brush Mountains with 2 of my closest friends, Nate and Jess. We weren't doing anything extreme. We just wanted to spend a full day outside, away from work, away from phones, away from noise. Nate had found a loop trail online. He said it was quiet, overlooked a few valleys, and didn't get much traffic. Perfect for what we had in mind. The plan was simple. Follow the loop, stop at a marked overlook for lunch, then circle back before it got dark. We parked around 9 in the morning, threw our packs on, and headed out. Everything started off fine. The trail was easy to follow, wide enough to walk side by side. The trees opened up in places where you could catch a breeze. It felt good to be out there. We joked around, compared snacks, talked about dumb stuff, normal stuff. But about 20 minutes in I noticed something strange. Not in a dramatic way, just subtle. The forest didn't sound right. There weren't any birds, not a single call. No rustling in the underbrush. Even the bugs were quiet. It was just trees, dirt, and this weird dead silence. You'd expect peace and quiet that far out, but this was too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. I didn't say anything at first because it felt silly, but eventually Nate brought it up. He was mid-story about a guy at his office who brought fish to work every day. Then he just stopped and said, "Wait, have you heard a single bird?" Jess shrugged and said, "Maybe it's the heat, they're probably sleeping or whatever." But even she didn't sound convinced. The deeper we went, the more that silence pressed in. Not in a horror movie way, more like we'd wandered into a part of the woods that didn't want to be found. I kept glancing back down the trail, half expecting something to be there. Nothing ever was, but that didn't help. About an hour in, we stopped near a big fallen log. I sat down, pulled off my pack, tried not to look over my shoulder. That's when Nate crouched near the edge of the trail and said, "Okay, what the hell is this?" We walked over and saw a track. At first I thought it was a bear print. It had that depth, like something heavy had stepped there, but the shape was wrong. It wasn't round. The front edge had 5 marks that stretched forward like long fingers. No claws, no pads, no fur marks, just clean, deep impressions in the dry dirt. Jess frowned and asked, "Is that a hand? None of us like that." Nate tried to play it off. Maybe a mountain lion dragging something. But even as he said it, he stepped back like the print might move. We kept walking, quieter now, and that's when the trail started to change. A slope where the map had shown. Flat stretch, a fork that didn't exist on Nate's printed guide. He checked the map 3 times, muttering, "This shouldn't be here." We chose the left path since it looked more worn. But things got stranger. A tree I swore we'd already passed showed up again 20 minutes later. A boulder shaped like a teardrop was suddenly on the wrong side of the trail. And around noon the light shifted. Less direct sun, more gray, like we'd walked under a screen. That's when the sound started. Not sudden, just faint. A dragging noise under our feet. Slow, heavy, like something wet being pulled through leaves. It wasn't fixed in one place. Sometimes behind us, sometimes to the side. I told myself it was water, maybe an underground stream, but it moved when we moved. And it stopped when we stopped. We picked up the pace. No one was talking now. Jess had that nervous half laugh she does when she's pretending she's fine. Nate kept pulling out the map, folding it back up. I tried to focus on the trail, but I kept catching flickers between the trees. Shapes pale fast, never more than a flash, like someone darting out of sight. Then we saw it. Not clearly, not all at once. It stepped across the trail behind us, maybe 30 feet back. I turned just in time to see it slip behind a tree. Its arms were too long. The way it moved didn't make sense. Awkward, like its joints bent the wrong way. Jess whispered, "Did you see that?" Then she started backing up. It came back a minute later. Same thing, stepping across the trail, closer this time. I didn't say a word, just started walking faster. Jess was already moving. Nate hesitated, then followed. None of us wanted to run yet. Running felt like admitting we were being hunted. Then it made a noise, not a growl, not a voice. A sharp hiss like air forced through torn lungs. That was it. Jess took off full sprint. Her pack bounced behind her. Nate and I followed. We didn't look back. The dragging picked up speed, closer. Now snapping branches, rolling stones, not footsteps. Something crawling fast and wrong. Bones scraping together under too much weight. The sound bounced through the trees like they wanted to carry it to us. We ran until I couldn't breathe. And then I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I looked back. It was there on the trail, tall, bent low. Its limbs swung wide, nearly brushing the ground. Its skin was gray, stretched thin like plastic over bone. And its face, God, its face was smooth. No eyes, no nose, just a slit twitching open and shut in jerky motions like it was tasting the air or laughing. I yelled at Jess and Nate to go faster even though I could barely speak. We were off trail now, crashing downhill, praying gravity would take us somewhere safe. Every so often I heard that hiss again, closer than before. The dragging never stopped, it just followed, patient. And then without warning, it all went quiet. No hiss, no dragging, no snapping branches, just silence again. But this time it felt different. The air felt normal, lighter. Then a bird call, then another. Flies buzzing past my ear. The sounds of a normal forest. We slowed. Jess was crying. Nate looked hollow, like he'd been wrung out. We followed the slope until we saw a trail sign, one we didn't remember passing. It pointed toward the parking area. We followed it, silent, afraid the sound might return. When the trees broke and we saw the lot, I didn't believe it was real. Families, dogs, a guy grilling hot dogs. It was like we'd stepped into another world. Jess sat down on the curb, legs giving out. Nate went straight to the map board, staring like it might change if he looked long enough. Then he said, "This isn't the trail." He was right. The bends, the slope, the overlook. We didn't see any of it on the map, not even the name. It was like we'd walked a path that didn't exist. We barely talked on the drive home. The silence in the car was heavier than the silence in the woods. We each had our own version of what happened, but no one wanted to say it out loud. That night I couldn't stop thinking about those tracks. I searched online, animal prints, forest predators, cryptid forums. Nothing matched. Nothing with a face like that. I haven't gone back to Pine Brush. The Blue Gate Mountains had been tugging at the back of my mind for years. Like a to-do list item I kept circling, but never checked off. When I finally carved out 3 days off from work, I didn't hesitate. I packed light, stuffed my old canvas bag with the essentials: tent, tarp, water filter, stove. One change of clothes, and drove out alone. No company, no itinerary, no marked trails. I wasn't interested in the postcard version of the place. I wanted the real woods. The kind you step into and don't hear another voice all day. Day 1 was everything I'd hoped for. I followed an old service trail, then peeled off about 3 hours in and started cutting through undergrowth. I'd studied the topographic maps enough to know where the ridgelines were, where water should be, and how to find my way back even if I wandered. The deeper I went, the better it felt. No cell signal, no signs nailed to trees, just layers of green, the steady rhythm of my boots, and a silence that wrapped around me. Like a blanket, I made camp on a slope above a stream, cooked noodles, brushed my teeth under the stars, fell asleep with the tarp flapping gently in the breeze. When I woke the next morning, everything felt normal. Boots damp from dew, shoulders stiff from the pack. I boiled water for coffee, repacked, and started moving again, following a narrow deer path that wound east into thicker forest. About an hour in, I saw something that stopped me cold. In the middle of the trail, like it had been placed there on purpose, was a rabbit dead. At first, I figured some predator got it. A fox maybe. Or an owl. But the closer I looked, the less that made sense. Its head wasn't just missing. It had been cleanly removed. The cut down its stomach was straight and tidy, not ripped like you'd expect from claws. No signs of a struggle, no blood spray. Just a neat little pool beneath it, and the body laid out like it was waiting for an autopsy. I crouched down, staring longer than I should have. No prints in the dirt, no drag marks, nothing to explain how it got there. The air felt oddly still, like the woods were holding their breath. Eventually, I stood up and walked away faster than before. I told myself I was overthinking. Nature's weird. Animals do strange things. Maybe someone left it as a trap. Maybe by midday, I was deep in thick brush, branches clawing at my sleeves, visibility dropping to 20 feet. That's when I heard the footsteps, not behind me, not ahead, off to my left, always at the edge of my vision, moving parallel. Whenever I stopped, they stopped. Whenever I picked up the pace, they did too. I paused once, hand on a tree trunk, turning my head slowly. Nothing, just dense green. I said, "Hey, hello," half laughing like maybe it was another hiker. No answer, just a single bird call in the distance. Then silence again. After that, I kept going. Every now and then I'd hear a crunch, just one, then freeze. It never got closer, never further either, always just out of reach. That evening, I stopped in a clearing between two hills and set up camp. I didn't want to. I wanted to keep moving until dark. But my legs were done. While the stove hissed, I crouched next to it stirring noodles, and that's when I felt it, the weight of eyes on me. I turned slowly, headlamp off, relying only on the dim light of sunset. At the edge of the trees, 30 feet out, I saw a shape shift. At first I thought it was a tree stump, or maybe a black bear, tall, upright, still, but it moved, and then I saw him, a man or something that used to be a man, filthy from head to toe, hair hanging in thick ropes around his face, clothes shredded, clinging to him like seaweed. He didn't move closer, didn't speak. He crouched low, just watching. I didn't move either. My spoon hovered over the pot, body locked in place. He didn't blink, didn't shift. Then, as quietly as he appeared, he slipped backward into the woods. No sound, no rustle. Gone. I didn't sleep. Didn't even get into my bag. I sat with my back against the pack, headlamp in one hand, knife in the other, all night. I heard rustling circling the camp, never close, never far, like someone pacing the perimeter. As soon as the sky lightened, I packed up and started hiking again. No breakfast, my legs ached, but I didn't care. I just needed to move. Around midday, I found another marker, if you could call it that. A tree stripped of bark in perfect vertical lines. 6 of them, each 2 inches wide, carved from shoulder. Hiked down to the roots, not claw marks, too even, too controlled, done slowly, carefully. I ran my fingers along the grooves. The wood underneath was fresh and pale, still moist. Whoever or whatever did this did it recently. Further along, the trail thinned to a knife-edge ridge. That's where I saw them. 2 figures stood at the Far end of the narrow path, barefoot, covered in filth, thin as rails. Ribs showing through grime-caked skin, hair hanging like wet ropes over their faces. They didn't speak, didn't look surprised. Just stood there waiting. I raised a hand slowly, not to wave, more like, hey, I'm not a threat. Nothing. Then the one on the left crouched low, fingers digging into dirt, the way he moved. Not like a person about to run, like an animal coiling. To spring, I backed up one step, another, then I turned and ran. The ridge dropped into a steep slope, and I didn't care about footing. I barreled down, branches slapping, thorns tearing. Didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just needed distance. At the bottom, I hit a shallow stream, waded through. Water splashing to my knees, boots filling instantly. I clawed up the opposite bank and collapsed in the brush, gasping, and then I heard it. A high-pitched whoop then. Another, then a wave of them, not words, not laughter either, a signal, something meant to echo through the trees. It chilled me more than anything. It sounded like hunting. I pushed myself up and kept moving. No trail, just raw forest. I didn't stop. Legs cramped, lungs burned. Still I crashed through brush like a deer fleeing fire. Late afternoon, I stumbled. Onto gravel. An old fire road half eaten by weeds and erosion. I followed it blindly. Didn't know the direction. Just forward, eventually. A truck came around the bend. Park ranger. I must have looked like hell. Mud-caked, bleeding, soaked. He rolled down his window. You lost? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I just nodded. He gave me a lift back to the main station, offered water, tried small talk. I just stared out the window. I never told him what I saw. I didn't know how to explain it. My brother Clay and I had been planning this escape for months. We were both buried under emails, deadlines, and responsibilities stacking up higher than we could handle. So we decided on 3 nights in the Smoky Mountains, completely off the grid. We found an old cabin on the edge of a small town called Hartwell Ridge. Calling it a town felt generous. It had a single gas station, a diner that shut before dusk, and a few houses clinging to the ridge like they were barely holding on. By the time we arrived, the sky had turned velvet black and the mountains loomed around us like shadows waiting to move. We stopped at the gas station to fill up before dark swallowed us completely. The man behind the counter looked rough, thick accent, his voice heavy like it carried old stories. He watched us while we paid, then leaned forward and said, "Don't get caught on the ridges after dark, not unless you want the Stitcher finding you." He smirked, but his eyes stayed serious. Daring us to ask, Clay nudged me, asked what the hell a Stitcher was. The man just shrugged, muttered, "Y'all don't belong out there at night," and disappeared behind the counter. Clay scoffed, called it old superstition, but the chill in my chest lingered long after we reached the cabin. Ate greasy diner food, warm and salty, though one of the burgers tasted gritty, like it had dirt mixed in. I didn't think too hard about it. We were there to disconnect, breathe something cleaner. Then office air. Inside the cabin was a hand-drawn map, faded but clear enough. It read, "Trail to overlook about half-mile." We thought, why not stretch our legs before bed? So we grabbed our flashlights and set out. The trail began easy, dirt path, wooden markers. On trees, cool night air pressing around us. We laughed, talked about work and old jokes. It felt simple. Then we saw a broken log, split perfectly down the middle, moss clinging to it like frosting on a cake. We walked past, but a few minutes later, there it was again. The same break, the same moss. I stopped, said, "Didn't we already pass that?" Clay shrugged, said trails loop sometimes, but I knew it was the same log. My stomach twisted. Eventually we reached the overlook, but instead of relief, it felt wrong. The trees leaned heavy, shadows too thick, and the path hadn't forked. No chance we could have looped. Still, we'd ended right back where we started. Clay stayed quiet, flashlight sweeping the trees like he expected someone watching. On the way back, the forest pressed closer. Our breath sounded louder. Then the first crack of a branch broke the silence. Not small, not a squirrel or rabbit. This was slow and heavy, deliberate. Clay whipped his flashlight side to side. Nothing there. Silence followed. Then another crack from the other side. It was circling us. Probably a deer, Clay whispered. But his voice wavered. I forced myself to walk, and the sound walked with us, keeping pace, then sliding ahead. Waiting in the dark, then I felt it. A hand, cold and certain, brushing across my shoulder, dragging its fingers down my shirt. My body locked. Clay was steps ahead. Too far to touch me. I spun with the flashlight shaking. Nothing but trees staring back. My legs broke free. I shouted for Clay and ran. Branches scratched my face. Roots tripped my shoes. Something followed, snapping branches in rhythm with our run. And then it stopped. We burst out of the trees onto the gravel road. Light from our flashlights scattered, but behind us, only silence. Our breathing loud in the night. Inside the cabin, every sound felt alive. The creak of the floor, the groan of the walls, the wind brushing against corners. We sat against the wall in the living room, lights off, not speaking, wide-eyed and waiting. Sleep never came. I watched the black ceiling fade to gray, then brighten with morning. Clay didn't move. We packed fast, jittery, left without food or fuel. The gaslight blinked, but we didn't care. We drove away without a word. Clay never spoke of it again. I never asked, but I know what I felt. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a branch. It was fingers, cold and real. And the man at the gas station hadn't been joking when he said Stitcher. It wasn't just a story. I was 21 when it happened. We had been talking about it since college. A real hiking trip. The idea started small like most dumb ideas do. A few beers, a long weekend, maybe a day hike somewhere nearby. But it kept growing, turned into a week. Long trip through parts of the Smoky Mountains, carrying everything we needed on our backs, tents, food, clothes, maybe a flask or two. It sounded perfect in theory, one of those reset your brain kind of adventures. I think all three of us were quietly hoping for something we couldn't really name, some sense of peace or clarity, or maybe just not feeling burned out at 21. We packed light, or at least we thought we did, the kind of light that still meant overloaded backpacks and duct-taped gear. Derek brought the map. Mason brought a tiny hatchet he wouldn't shut up about. I brought way too many granola bars. None of us were exactly seasoned hikers, but we had watched enough YouTube videos to fake it. The first few days were great, hard, but in a good way. We stuck to less popular trails, ones Derek found on forums, or remembered from a family trip years back. Hike during the day, find a spot in the evening, set up camp, cook whatever we had energy for, then crash early. It all blurred into this calm rhythm. Wake up sore, hike, eat, sleep, repeat, everything. Smelled like dirt and sweat, and honestly, it was kind of amazing. We didn't see many people, which we liked. Maybe one or two hikers the first day, then none after that. The deeper we went into the woods, the quieter everything felt. No service, no screens, just boots on dirt and the occasional squirrel that always sounded way bigger than it was. By the fourth day, we were tired in that deep, satisfying way, not just in our bodies, but in our heads, like our brains had finally powered down. That evening, Derek pointed out a spot off one of the narrower trails. Said he had camped there with his uncle years ago. A small clearing surrounded by tall trees, enough light for a fire but sheltered, perfect. We set up our tents in a triangle around an old half-buried fire pit. Mason joked we were probably sleeping on top of some long-dead scout troop. We laughed, but not for long. We were too worn out. Dinner was just the last of our noodles, boiled over a tiny stove while we passed around the last of the jerky. We sat around the fire for a while, watching the flames sink into embers. Derek started telling a story about getting lost on a school trip. Mason kept interrupting with fake ghost noises, normal stuff. Easy, like we could have stayed that way forever. Eventually, I peeled off first. My legs felt like concrete and my sleeping bag was calling. I heard them still talking as I zipped my tent, but their voices faded fast once I lay down. I don't know what time I woke up. Middle of the night, definitely. The air was cold. My throat felt dry. At first I just lay there trying to figure out what pulled me awake. No dreams, no sudden noise, just this weight, this strange stillness. Then I heard it, someone calling my name. It wasn't loud, it was quiet in that way that makes you listen harder, drawn out, followed by my name stretched. Thin, I blinked, trying to wake up more. Thought maybe one of them had gone out to pee and was messing with me. I sat up and unzipped the tent a few inches, whispered back, "What do you want?" No answer. Across the clearing, both tents looked untouched. Zipped up, no headlamps, no movement, nothing. Then it came again, my name closer this time, still soft. But clear. It sounded like Derek, exactly like him, except it didn't feel like him. The voice was hollow, like it was trying too hard. Like someone had played a clip of him and slowed it down just a bit. My heart thudded heavy in my chest. I unzipped the flap all the way and shined my flashlight into the trees. Nothing, just trees and brush. Then the footsteps started, not fast, not loud, just a steady crunching on dry leaves. But wrong, no rhythm, like someone walking after only. Seeing a video of walking once, steps speeding up, stopping too long. Dragging like one foot was stuck. They circled us. You could hear them behind trees, shifting direction, pausing. I swung the flashlight back and forth, half expecting to catch someone crouched behind a trunk. Nothing. Then came the laugh or something like it. A low rattling wheeze, like a laugh clawing out through a chest full of fluid. The voice followed. "Come out." Still Derek's voice. Still wrong. That was enough. I scrambled out of my tent and ran straight for Derek's. I yanked his zipper down and shook him hard. He came up swinging, cursing, eyes wild. Before I could explain, the thing called again. This time his name in his own voice. He froze, I froze. His eyes locked on mine. He mouthed, "You heard that too." We went to Mason's tent. He was snoring like a chainsaw. Derek grabbed his arm. I shook his shoulder until he woke up confused and annoyed. He started to ask what the hell we were doing. Then the voice called again. Mason just once, perfectly in his tone. He shut up. We didn't need to talk about it. We knew. We grabbed what we could. Sleeping bags stuffed into packs without folding. Food left behind. Tent poles still on the ground. Nothing tied down. We just started walking. Headlamps on. Eyes forward. The voices followed. They didn't shout. They whispered over and over. Sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, sometimes curious, sometimes mocking, mostly perfect. Every now and then they slipped, drew out a vowel too long, changed tone halfway through, or all three names came at once, mashed together like bad audio playback. We didn't talk, couldn't. If one of us spoke, I think it would have broken whatever control we had left. Whenever we slowed, the footsteps returned, close enough to hear, never close enough to see. Always circling, keeping pace, never rushing, like it didn't need to. We walked for hours, or what felt like hours. Every bend looked the same. Every patch of trees felt identical. My legs burned. My mouth stayed dry. I don't remember stopping once, not even to drink. Finally the trail widened. The trees thinned. The faint outline of the ranger station appeared in the distance. The voices stopped. No fading, no goodbye. 1 second they echoed around us. The next silence. We collapsed on the gravel outside the station. My knees hit hard. The silence felt too big. Like we had stepped out of something and back into the world. We didn't talk, not for a long time, just sat there shaking, breathing like we had run a marathon. When the rangers arrived at sunrise, none of us said a word. What could we have told them? That something in the woods had learned our voices and wore them like masks. We never went back for our gear, didn't care, and we've never hiked together since. We weren't planning anything fancy, just a cheap weekend away. Me, Julian, and our friend Mark. 3 guys with barely enough cash for gas and beer. Borrowing Julian's uncle's beat-up camper that sounded like it would fall apart every time we hit a bump. It wasn't much to look at. White peeling paint. A door that didn't close right. and a floor that creaked louder than it should have. But it had wheels, a half-functioning stove, and a place to crash without worrying about tents or rain. That was good enough for us. Julian's uncle didn't sugarcoat it when he handed us the keys. The camper hadn't been out of storage in over 10 years. He told us to expect mildew, spiders, maybe a dead mouse or two. He wasn't kidding. The smell inside was like wet cardboard and despair. We scrubbed it out as best we could, packed coolers, sleeping bags, and enough junk food for days. Then hit the road. Our target was the Smoky Mountains, somewhere past Clingman's Dome, not exactly marked on any map. Julian had found some obscure blog post about a half-hidden trail off an old ranger road, not part of any campground, which was the whole appeal. We didn't want picnic tables or RV hookups. We wanted real isolation. We parked a mile past where pavement ended, bumping along a dirt road that scraped the camper's undercarriage. Number cell signal, no signs, no maps, just a faint trail fading into the trees. The first night was standard camping. We managed to get a fire going with damp wood, burned hot dogs, drank warm beer, argued about nothing until the cold drove us inside. The camper was stiff and freezing, the walls thin. I kept waking through the night, certain I heard things, twigs snapping, leaves rustling. I told myself it was just forest sounds, but I kept staring out the tiny window by my bunk, seeing nothing but still trees, watching. The next morning we hiked. The trail was overgrown, but we followed the markers. Julian swore it led to ruins, or old homesteads tucked away on the ridge. Mid-morning we ran into a man heading toward us. He looked like a ranger, tan hat, green jacket, the build for it. But no name tag, no gear. His face was worn like leather. His eyes didn't blink much. He stopped, studied us like we didn't belong. He warned us to be careful, said bears had been spotted near the ridge. Julian mentioned the ruins. The man's whole expression changed, tight and sharp like someone had slapped him. He said, "There's nothing up there but rot and silence," then turned and walked straight into the brush, disappearing like he'd done it 100 times. We laughed it off later, called him Creepy Carl, made cryptid jokes. But the words stuck, rot and silence. That wasn't how you describe ruins. That night, Julian launched his cheap drone. Clunky, but with a thermal camera. He wanted to spot deer, or maybe coyotes by the creek. 20 minutes in, the feed showed strange heat patterns. Not animals, not people. Flickers of warmth circling a stand of trees. They didn't move, didn't glow like bodies, just pulsed like the ground itself was breathing, we argued. Julian said it was rocks holding sunlight. But that didn't make sense. The Smokies aren't geothermal. We went there in the morning. Stepping into the clearing felt wrong. The air was thinner, drained. The trees spaced wider. Their colors washed out. At the center stood a chimney. Just a chimney. No cabin. Bricks blackened at the top like they burned long after the house was gone. A half wall leaned nearby, draped in vines. Old debris scattered everywhere. Nails, glass, warped tools. And then I heard it, humming, a woman's voice, soft and tuneless. The same few notes repeating. It came from the edge of the clearing. Close but unseen, I stepped forward. My boot touched the chimney's base, and the humming cut off instantly. Not fading, just gone, like sound had been yanked away. I didn't tell the others. That night I woke at 3:07. Total silence, not just quiet. Silence like the world had been paused. No bugs, no wind. Then I heard breathing, slow and heavy, just outside the camper wall by my head. Steady exhales, too deliberate. It lasted 10 seconds, then nothing. In the morning we found footprints behind the camper. Not animal, not normal, human-shaped but wrong. Long toes, spaced oddly, circling the camper twice before disappearing without disturbing leaves or branches. Julian said it was a prank, maybe a hermit. We checked the drone footage again. Nothing until the very end, when the battery was dying. A figure appeared at the tree line. Tall, thin, long-armed, motionless, just standing, head tilted like it was listening. We shut it off and never flew it again. Later I found something in my sleeping bag. a scrap of blue fabric, frayed like from an old dress. Faintly smelling of damp leaves. I hadn't packed it. Neither had Julian or Mark, they swore. It wasn't theirs. I had been alone in the camper that morning. Then came the fog. By afternoon it was thick, swallowing sound. Cutting sight to a few feet, everything felt closer. Like the woods were pressing in, whispers drifted in the fog, low and circling, like voices in another room. None of us wanted to admit we heard it. Julian cracked the window to listen. Something tapped the glass sharply like a fingernail. We slammed it shut, turned on every light, and stayed awake until morning. The next day we packed, no debate, we were done. 20 minutes into the trail it split into two forks. Where before there had only been one. We chose left, walked an hour, and ended back in the same clearing, same trees, same ground. Except now the chimney was whole, perfect red brick with smoke curling from the top. I stepped toward it without thinking, my body moving ahead of my mind. The humming returned, surrounding us. Then the smoke vanished. The chimney collapsed brick by brick in slow motion. We ran, crashing through brush. No trail, no direction, until we finally stumbled onto a gravel road. Hours later, a truck picked us up. The driver stared at us like we'd come back from the dead. He said we were lucky we hadn't ended up in Widow's Hollow. I was camping solo in the Blue Hollow Range the first time I heard about the ridge. You probably haven't heard of Blue Hollow, most people haven't. It's part of a quieter stretch of the southern Appalachian, not quite the Smokies, not quite. The Blue Ridge, tucked between them like something forgotten, that's what drew me in. I'd already done the big trails, Shenandoah, Pisgah, even parts of the Appalachian Trail. What I wanted now was solitude, places where the maps blurred and the signs rotted away. I wasn't chasing danger, not really. I just liked quiet places where the world still felt untouched. So I pulled into this small ranger outpost outside Milner, Tennessee, midweek. The place was nearly empty. Behind the counter sat a man in his 60s, maybe older. He wore a stiff canvas shirt with faded patches. His face was weathered, the kind you see on people who've lived through more than they talk about. I asked if there were any quiet loops nearby, specifically something that didn't see much traffic. The moment I said it, his expression shifted. Not much, but enough. He leaned back, squinted at me, and then, without drama, said, "There's a ridge trail north of Kepler Fork. Not maintained anymore. Locals avoid it." Naturally, I asked why. He hesitated, then sighed and leaned forward like he was about to recite something he didn't like repeating. He said people had gone missing there over the years, not often, maybe one or two a decade. But what unsettled him more were the search teams. They came back different, not hurt, not hysterical, just disoriented. One man swore he walked the same half-mile clearing 3 times in a row. Another insisted the trees shifted when he wasn't looking. Someone else found footprints that started in the middle of a dry creek bed, as though someone had simply appeared there. They call it a local legend, he said. I call it a good reason to stay on the marked trails. But the way he said it didn't feel like a warning for tourists. It felt like a rule, the kind you never break, even if you don't know why. I thanked him, nodded, and of course, did the opposite. The ridge wasn't on any official map, but the faint trail was still there if you looked, overgrown, barely more than a suggestion. I had my GPS, compass, extra water, and backup batteries. I wasn't being reckless. I figured the story was just folklore, something to scare kids or keep people off forgotten ground. I reached the ridge by late afternoon and found a small flat spot just below the crest. Some stones nearby suggested an old fire ring. Scattered but still usable, I rebuilt it, lit a small fire, cooked noodles, and wrote in my trail journal before leaning back against my pack. My mind wandered back to the ranger's voice. Not dramatic, not spooky, just resigned. That unsettled me more than the story itself. Still, I brushed it off, zipped the tent, and went to sleep. At dawn I woke with a strange sense that something had shifted, not fear exactly, just different. When I stepped out of the tent, the fire ring was gone. Not scattered, not knocked over, gone. The stones nowhere in sight. The ground smooth, damp with morning dew. No ash, no charcoal, nothing. My tent was still there. My pack still against the tree. The slope, the trees, the angle of the clearing. Everything looked slightly off, like a copied version of reality. That wasn't quite perfect. I told myself I must have been mistaken. Maybe I built the fire elsewhere, but I knew I hadn't. I'm methodical. I set up the same way every time, triple checking gear. Still, I packed up and started back toward the main trail. About an hour in, I came to a fork, no markers. Just two faint paths. Neither looked familiar. I picked the left one. It dipped into a shallow gully and curved through birch trees. Climbing out, I froze. I was standing at my own campsite. The fire ring rebuilt exactly as I'd made it. My tent gone, but the indent in the dirt where it had been was still there. My stomach dropped. I had not looped. I had walked straight, determined. I drew my knife and marked deep gouges into trees as I went. After 15 minutes, I turned back. The bark was smooth, no marks, nothing. That's when I began hearing things, not voices, not animals, just wrong sounds. Snaps that didn't echo right. Rustling that shifted from far to near. I spun around more than once, but nothing was ever there. The trail itself seemed to move. Roots curled where none had been. Rocks changed shape. I stepped over a long fallen log, only to see the same log again ahead of me minutes later. I muttered to myself, "Don't stop, keep moving, stay straight." My only anchor was the rhythm of my words. By mid-afternoon, drenched in sweat and dizzy, I sat on a fallen trunk, pulling out water to rest. That's when I saw it, my name carved. Deep into the log, the edges burned and weathered, not fresh old, but there, Emery. I hadn't done it. I hadn't even seen that log before. But it was waiting for me. I couldn't sit there. I kept walking. As the sun dropped, I caught the faint smell of smoke, thin, familiar, like a campfire close by. Desperate, I turned toward it, praying for another person. Instead, I found my own fire ring again, stones rebuilt, ash faintly glowing. The same crescent burn mark where I'd spilled noodles the night before. My pack still against the tree, my tent gone, my journal back, open on the ground, a page torn out. The words "Dad did it" written across the page. I didn't sleep, I sat. With my knife in hand, breathing slow. The woods were silent, too silent. Around 3 in the morning, I noticed, the journal lay open. The torn page gone. At first light, I threw on the pack and walked. No compass, no map, just forward. I ignored every fork, never turned, never looked back. Once I thought I saw someone crouched behind a tree, but I didn't stop. I never stopped. And then somehow, a gravel road appeared. I dropped to my knees, convinced it was a mirage. Hours later, a maintenance truck came. 2 men in vests pulled over. They thought I was dehydrated or on something. I barely spoke. They drove me back to the outpost. The ranger was there. He looked at me once, just once, and didn't ask a single question. He handed me a bottle of water and walked away. It started out like any other weekend trip. My friends and I had been talking about going to the Smoky Mountains for a while. It was the perfect spot for us. We all shared a love for nature, hiking, camping, and just getting lost in the woods. For a few days, the mountains were calling, and we were more than ready to answer. There were 4 of us, me, my best friend Jake, and then Ryan and Ben. We had all been friends since high school. And even though we were different in many ways, there was an unspoken bond between us, like brothers. That Friday afternoon we piled into my truck, ready to leave behind the chaos of school and work. The long drive ahead was just an excuse to talk and joke around. After a few hours we were deep into the Smokies. The roads grew smaller, winding tighter, and the trees seemed to close in around us. Like we were leaving the world behind. We didn't have a specific spot in mind, just a vague idea of where we wanted to end up. We had camped enough over the years to know that the beauty of nature was in the unpredictability. It was about finding that perfect remote place where no one else had thought to go. By the time we found the spot, it was getting dark. The air was cool and crisp with that sharp bite you only get in the mountains. A small creek cut through the clearing, tall trees surrounded us, and the silence felt almost sacred, like the forest had been waiting. We knew right away this was the place. There was something special about it. No one around, just us, the creek, and the woods. We set up camp quickly, tents up, fire going, and after a long week the first beers cracked open. The flames crackled, crickets sang, an owl called in the distance, and the creek murmured softly. We laughed, we talked, the kind of easy flow that happens only with old friends. The world beyond the mountains felt far away, but slowly, something began to feel off. It was small at first, like a quiet tension in the air. The way you sense when something isn't right, but can't explain why. Nature has a rhythm, we all knew it. The sounds of wind through trees, animals calling, leaves rustling, all blending into something familiar. But those sounds faded. Not all at once, but little by little, until the only sound left was the fire. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, wrong. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Jake noticed first. His body stiffened, eyes locked on the darkness just beyond the fire. "You hear that?" he whispered, hesitant, afraid of the words. We all went quiet. Ryan stopped fiddling with his beer. Ben turned toward the trees. The air felt charged. My hair stood on end. At first I heard nothing. Then it came, footsteps, slow and deliberate. They weren't the light steps of a deer or any other animal. They were heavier, measured, purposeful, moving from the trees where the firelight ended. Jake's hand drifted to the hatchet at his side, his eyes wide, caught between dread and disbelief. "Anyone else hear that?" he asked again, his voice shaking. Ryan forced a weak laugh. Probably just an animal, but his tone betrayed him. Even he didn't believe it. Ben was staring hard at the tree line, his face pale. He was scared. We all were. Jake shook his head firmly. "That's no animal," he said, his voice certain. The footsteps stopped, and the woods went still, completely still. My heart pounded in my chest. The fire's crackle was the only sound, thin against the silence. Then a new sound came, a growl. It was low, guttural, wrong, too deep to belong to anything natural. It rumbled through the clearing like it didn't belong to the forest at all. It was distorted, almost human but twisted. My stomach tightened. Jake called out, "Who's there?" his voice wavering, but defiant. There was no answer. Just the growl again, louder this time, closer, vibrating through the ground beneath. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. The trees seemed to lean in around us, watching, waiting. And then something moved, a shape at the edge of the clearing. It stepped into the fire's glow, and every thought froze in my head. It wasn't human, tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that stretched too long, moving in a way that wasn't bound by nature. It seemed to glide instead of step. It stopped just at the edge of the firelight, its shadow stretching across the dirt. We stood frozen, staring. Its presence was enough. It didn't speak, didn't need to. Jake forced himself to ask again, "Who are you?" his voice cracking. The figure tilted its head but gave no answer. It took a step forward, and the shadows around it shifted, clinging to it like living things. The fire flickered as if shrinking back, and I saw its face, pale, translucent skin stretched thin, drained of life, eyes like black voids, endless pits that seemed to pull me in. My body trembled. Then I saw its mouth, no lips, only jagged teeth, sharp and endless. Its grin was not human, it was hunger. It opened its mouth, the growl shifting into something worse. A sound that was almost a song but wrong, vibrating through my bones, freezing my blood. Without thinking, I grabbed a burning stick and threw it. Sparks burst at its feet. The figure jerked back, its head snapping unnaturally, its body twisting, stretching into something monstrous, unrecognizable, a nightmare made flesh. And then, just like that, it was gone, swallowed by the trees, vanished. We sat in stunned silence. The fire crackled, But none of us spoke. The night dragged on. Every shadow alive, every sound wrong. None of us dared to sleep. We just waited. By morning, we packed up in silence. No one spoke of staying. No one spoke at all. We piled into the truck. The engine's rumble more comforting than anything. I don't know what we saw that night, but I know one thing. It wasn't human. Whatever it wasn't from this world.